It's a great pleasure to have a regular visitor to these events, the Honourable Steven Joyce. Steven Joyce is a senior minister in the New Zealand government. Some would call him the Chief Operating Officer of New Zealand, driving a lot of the strategic initiatives, policy initiatives, right through to execution at the grassroots. Steven covers a large number of areas. He's the Minister of Economic Development. He's the Minister of Regulatory Reform, Science and Innovation, Tertiary Education, Skills, Employment. He's the Associate Minister for Finance. So from my perspective, he's the Minister of everything relevant to angel investment. And the Minister has supported these events, I think it's the fourth or fifth year in a row. In fact, it's relatively easy to understand because the Minister is an entrepreneur himself, so he's been at the start of the process that most of us engage in partnership with entrepreneurs as investors. So I'd like to welcome the Minister, Steven Joyce, to the stage.
Kia ora everyone, good evening. Fantastic to be here. Literally, actually, today I've been all around the place. Auckland, Christchurch, Ashburton, Christchurch, and now Queenstown. So, great place to finish, you're thinking. And it is. I'm also very conscious, and you don't even know this yet, but it's actually looking really wonderful out there. And there's all these glasses of wine lined up for you all. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, this is not the ideal gig, is it? Sitting here between you and a glass of wine at one of the most beautiful spots in the world. Can I have a show of hands of who the visitors are, please, from offshore? Just a general show of hands. Fantastic. Welcome. Welcome to New Zealand. It's all like this. And that's the stunning part. You think you've come to the most exclusive spot in New Zealand, but you're wrong. The whole country is like this. So make sure you hang around and have a good look around, and you're welcome at any time to any part of New Zealand, and you'll find maybe not quite the same as Queenstown, but certainly pretty impressive for all of that. Look, I was thrilled to have the opportunity to say a few words tonight. I'm a passionate believer in this industry. It was pointed out that I started in the radio industry. That was in the 80s, which was fantastic, but there was no such thing as angel investment then, as I recall. We had angel investors, we didn't know what to call them. We also didn't have much money. I remember very clearly that the original capital of my company was 500 New Zealand dollars, made up of subscriptions of 5 shareholders at $100 each. And that was pretty much all we could scrape up because we were university students. And in fact, one of the guys couldn't scrape it up, so I had to lend him his $100. And as far as I can remember, I don't think I ever got it back. We went our first borrowings. We had to go to the bank and do the standard statement of assets and liabilities. I had no liabilities, so that wasn't an issue. I also had no assets, but from my suit jacket, which at the time was quite a significant investment. So I placed that on the register. The bank manager thought I was having a laugh, which I wasn't. But anyway, these are all ancient history stories. Flash forward, I'm now the Associate Minister of Finance in the John Key-led government. I've been the Associate Minister of Finance now for nearly 7 years, sort of Bill's wingman. And so it's been a pretty special day for us in the last 24 hours, where New Zealand became one of the first OECD countries to post a fiscal surplus again, post the global financial crisis. And appreciate that may or may not mean a massive amount to you, but it certainly means something to me. And it is exciting because, again, for our international visitors, we as a country created an additional difficulty factor post the global financial crisis, in that we had a very big earthquake in our second largest city, which cost a massive amount from the government of New Zealand and taxpayers of New Zealand to support. So we added that extra difficulty factor, and yet still this year we'll have posted our first fiscal surplus. And there's some reasons for that. And New Zealanders are a pretty resilient bunch. And actually we've had a pretty good post-global financial crisis period. Growth has softened a bit this year, which you would expect given what's been happening in the world and commodity prices and so on, and we could have a long yarn over a drink about the state of the world economy. But I think the reason that we've had a good post-GFC period is frankly, the entrepreneurial spirit of New Zealanders as we learn a number of things which are standing us in good stead in the world. Firstly, we're becoming much more connected as a country, and in particular right across the Asia-Pacific region, but what's really grown over the last 6 or 7 years is our links into China and Southeast Asia. And that's a very important part of the ongoing New Zealand story. My strong belief is New Zealand's future is very much in the Asia-Pacific rim. Yes, of course, Europe as well, and we can make the argument for India in terms of particularly of education services. And a lot of our ICT companies tend to look more towards North America and Europe. But in a lot of our traditional industries, food, agri-tech, education, tourism, that Asia-Pacific link is becoming very, very important to us. And as a country, we're getting more open and more connected. And I think that's a huge part of our future. And it's one of the things we advocate in our business growth agenda. And again, I'm pleased to report on the conclusion of negotiations for the TPP partnership, which I believe will truly be looked back upon as one of the transformational opportunities in the development of this country. And for those of us that have been here over the last 6 or 7 years, one of the reasons that we've had a good run of it has been the China FTA. Well, I believe the Trans-Pacific Partnership will be the China FTA and then some in terms of its impact, positive impact on New Zealand. So I think that's very exciting. So we have this business growth agenda and it covers 6 key areas that businesses need to develop and grow. And they're reasonably standard. It wasn't rocket science coming up with those 6 key areas. Access to markets, access to capital and investment, access to innovation, access to skills, access to natural resources, and access to the necessary infrastructure. I mean, that's pretty much the gig for most companies. Different proportions, but that's the gig. And so we work very closely with the private sector right across New Zealand on the themes of that business growth agenda. So we've recently been refreshing it, and we have released 3 refreshed chapters, at least 2 of which, and probably the 3rd, are relevant to this room. The firstly is the Export Markets Program, and TPP is the sort of the headline act for that at the moment. The second one is the Innovation Chapter, and that is hugely important. We need as a country to develop our innovation further. We're an interesting place for those of you that are new here. We officially don't show up that well on the business R&D stats. There's a number of reasons for that. One of them is we don't have a large pharmaceutical industry, we don't have a large motor vehicle industry, and so on, which generate quite a lot of the big R&D worldwide. But intriguingly, we do have a very high throughput of innovation in our companies. And I've lost count of the number of visitors from different parts of the world that wander in here and say, I just can't believe how that company with so few people has built so much that is innovative. And that's actually part of the New Zealand story and part of the New Zealand pitch. We are, by virtue, I believe, of our location and our relative isolation, likely to be far more innovative at a far lower cost than most of the rest of the world. And you can see that, I can tell you now, in hundreds of large and small companies, startups and established ones, hundreds and hundreds up and down this country. And it's actually pretty inspirational. And I think that's something we need to hold on and continue to nurture. And we have a huge list of programs, some 50 of them, that we're working on to build up that innovation ecosystem, whether it's in the public science or private. And I could list all those for you now. But I'm conscious again of what's going on outside, so I will hold a reading out by the bar of the Innovation Chapter, and you're most welcome to come and hear that reading if you wish. But suffice to say, it's there and it's well worth a read. Just Google BGA Innovation Chapter and you'll find it in a quiet moment, perhaps later on this evening, when you're looking to sort of wind yourself down for a snooze. It's a ripping yarn, but I don't promise that the plot development is as strong as perhaps some fiction books you'll read. The third one, which interestingly I have a copy of, we released actually just in the last couple of days, and that's the building investment stream. And that's hugely important. One thing this place needs is more capital. We have a lot of, as I said, very bright, very clever companies, but a shortage of capital investment. We've been making some good progress, particularly, frankly, at the angel and the startup end, with our range of things. We've really climbed into crowdfunding and peer-to-peer funding with some regulatory changes we've made that make that more permissible. We're working on things like cashing out tax losses for R&D purposes. We've got a series of funds through New Zealand VIF and the Seed Co-Investment Fund and a range of other funds that work in this space, and that's good. But actually the real, I think, challenge now is to make sure that we attract more investment at second and third stage development and keep growing those companies and keep supporting those entrepreneurs. And that's where you folk come in, so I'm thrilled to see you all here. Because as well as the angel side of it, it's actually that's those next stages that are really important. Frankly, we don't have enough capital in this country yet to meet our aspirations. Our aspirations, by the way, is to become not just one of the most prosperous small economies in the world, but if possible, the most prosperous small economy in the world. And that will take more capital investment. So again, I have this with me. That'll be the reading in the second half of the evening. But there's a range of things that we're working on, and in particular, an investment attraction strategy, which is being coordinated by the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and associated with a bunch of government agencies and the private sector to frankly identify, qualify, build a pipeline and attract further investment into the New Zealand economy, both domestically and internationally. So that's a very short summary of what's going on. It includes also some interesting initiatives around migration, opportunities for global impact visas, and which I know has been raised by people in this room, and that'll be developed over the next little while. So it's an exciting time to be a New Zealander. It's an exciting time to be in business in this country. I think we have massive potential. We have a fast-growing consumer class throughout the Asia-Pacific region, which is going to be the overwhelming, I hate the term megatrend, but the overwhelming megatrend over the next 10 to 20 years. Yes, we'll all be able to debate the softness or strength of the Chinese economy, where the US economy is going, whether the South Americans will ever get there, so on and so forth, till the cows come home, literally. But in New Zealand's context, we have an increasingly diversified set of markets, increasingly diversified set of businesses, rapidly growing ICT and high-tech sectors. And I think, I'd just love to be 28 again. It wouldn't be the radio industry this time. It'd be out there selling products, processes and services created by clever Kiwis offshore around the world. That's the challenge. Thank you very, very much for having me here this evening. I hope you enjoy your conference.
As the Minister's pointed out a couple of times, there's great wine waiting outside and then we're being spirited out of here. So I'll throw it up to one or two questions.
We like to be a little competitive with Australia. And now I'm actually really proud of the fact, which is leveraging off your question a bit, but I'm really proud of the fact that for the first time since 1991, we have net positive migration from Australia to New Zealand, which says actually, as a country, we're doing some things right. My personal view is that Australia will of course get its act together because that's what Australia does, and we'll be thrilled to work alongside Australia in a number of these areas. I see you've changed your Prime Minister recently, again. You must have more Italians and Greeks in Australia than I thought. I know Malcolm, and he's actually a pretty good operator. We've met over ICT a few times, and actually I genuinely hope that Australia gets to a point soon again where the federal government gets some stability, because that's actually very crucial. You can't do any of this stuff without having a platform, and we're very conscious of that. So we spend a lot of our time as a government thinking about how we maintain and operate a platform from which we can do things successfully. Because if you don't have that, then frankly you spend your entire time putting out fires. I actually think it's going pretty well now. It's tough. I mean, and people forget, but Christchurch CBD was completely taken out by that earthquake, just about, and a good third of the residential area in Christchurch. Good news, we now have, I think we've passed the point where we now have more houses built than we've lost in the city, so that's great. And in actual fact, you can see that in the moderation of house prices and rents as developments come on stream. We're working on the same model for Auckland, actually, but a way to go there. But the CBD is still developing again, and I'm very proud of the innovation precinct we got going on there. We've got some excellent retail, and companies are coming back into town. I think my genuine view of Christchurch is, even though it's been the toughest thing that could happen to any city, Christchurch will come out of this, and is coming out of this, more vital, more aspirational, more energised than it would otherwise have been, which is one of the great paradoxes of natural disasters and their impact. You either give up or you get going and you make something more than what you had before. And Christchurch is going to be a marvellous 21st century city. We don't have to worry about that. I think that's ordained now.
All right, folks. Hey, thanks again, and wish you all the best.